Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us. And thanks for coming back if you're a regular viewer of our demystifying series. And a new month, we have a brand new topic. And this month we're going to be talking about shooting for the grade. And I'm delighted to be joined this week by our usual panel of experts. We've got colorists and filmmakers. So welcome back, Max, who's the onboard colorist at Maxon.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Max. Hi there. Diego is are you a master trainer at Resolve? You are, aren't you?
Yeah. I'm a master
yes,
trainer.
Exactly. We can call you Diego, though.
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
Diego,
call me Diego.
yes. And Diego also does lots of sessions for broadcasters and recommends different workflows and color grading setups, as well as doing professional jobs as well. So thanks for joining us. And welcome, Tony. Welcome back, Tony. Tony is a professional filmmaker and colorist based in Los Angeles. So hi there, Tony. And we are delighted also to welcome with us from Canon, from Genaro Arroyo. Forgive my pronunciation.
No problem, buddy.
And you'll see him in just 1 second.
So he's senior technical market specialist at Canon. And he's going to help us out with the theme of what we're doing today, which is we're investigating, essentially, we're solving problems at the grading stage before you hit record on the camera and making good camera choices and so on. And this is the theme for this month. So the first 2 weeks, we're going to be talking more heavily about cameras and how they affect the workflow and some recipes for post-production inside various software applications. And then also on week 3, we're joined by Sigma lenses to carry on that conversation. And then also on week 4, we'll jump into more of the technical aspect of it in the grading process as well. And we're joined by the product manager from Maxon for the Magic Bullet suite. Loads of stuff to get through. And just a little bit of housekeeping in case you haven't joined us before, we are recording this. And we record all our sessions. And in fact, let's just show you here. The sessions are listed on the Maxon site. If you go to maxon.net and you just go to events, this is where you see all these sessions. And if you want to watch any of the recordings, you can just hop over to YouTube. And if you search for Maxon Training Team on YouTube, then that will take you through to all our dozens and dozens. Well, I think we've got 60 or 70 hours worth of these webinar content recordings. And so you'll see this webinar with all the various links that we talk about when we on the actual description section of the recording. And I can't let this week go by without letting you know that tomorrow, Wednesday and Thursday, we're running some sessions on Redshift and cinema and compositing, and master trainer Lionel VC Domini is running those too. So if you want to join those, because we're talking to you from Maxon, which does a whole range of tools all across the different post-production genre, if you like. So we're talking about shooting for the grade, but also this week we've got some 3D and post-production in terms of compositing. So have a look at those too. And I also, it behoves me to mention, we want to give you a free t-shirt as well. So if you go to the merch store, or maxon-merch-store.myshopify.com, and we'll send you the link for this as well in the follow-up email, and that link will be in the YouTube channel. And if you put your the code word or the coupon code demystifying inside the checkout box, then you get a free t-shirt. You don't have to pay like $3 or $4 or euros for shipping, depending where you are. But we just wanted to do the sort of thing that we used to do when we could all meet up in person when we're on site at various roadshows and so on. So please feel free to go and pick up a t-shirt from there. Fantastic. Great. So I'm going to just jump across back to software here. And I think we can go over now to you, Tony, can't we? Because you were going to kick things off.
Yes. All right, I'll do the showcase and then we'll get into the nitty gritty. So let me see, do you want to share this? Let me share
I'll make you a presenter. Here we go. Great. Right. And please ask questions as we go along, because we have the questions panel where you can type in questions, and we'll try and answer those as we go along, because that's the whole point of doing these things live, We want to make them accessible and answer questions that you've got for particular workflows. And we've had a few questions sent in via email already, which we're going to cover too. And so if you want to do that for the next sessions, training@maxon.net will come through to us.
All right. So what are we showcasing today? The R5 and some 1DX Mark III, two of Canon's newest hybrid cameras, right, Genaro?
Yes, Dolly. So they're the most recently released bodies for the hybrid photographer and cinematographer.
So basically, what that translates to somebody like me is that they shoot a beautiful image, but you definitely need to understand how do you wire your menu system, and how do you what button you push, and what are you going to take away by adding one mode versus another. And we'll talk about that. I will give you my down and dirty version. Some frustration and some happiness, and that's always a good balance to get such a beautiful image in a small package.
Tony, do you want to set the scene, because you do a lot of filmmaking, but how do you go about choosing a camera? Because you can choose effectively a stills camera that can take video, and then you can work up the grade if you like, and then you can get cameras that are specific to shooting for video rather than stills, and you can get away with production for both of those. So are there any kind of rules of thumb that you have experienced, or problems to avoid on the way?
I'll give you the short answer. So A, your client picks, or B, you have some influence, and when you have influence, it's a beautiful thing. That's when you can say, I use these cameras, I have these cameras, or I can rent this camera. So for me personally, I prefer the dedicated video cameras. We'll be talking about the Canon side of that next week. But hybrid cameras, or like I remember when the 5D Mark II came out, it was a really big thing to be able to shoot beautiful, high quality video inside of your DSLR. So that's evolved tenfold ever since. So I had the 5D Mark II. And I had the 7D, but I came from a traditional camera, and I have it around here somewhere, the XL2, which was this massive camera that was a dedicated video camera. Main reasons why: it's like dedicated audio right on board, the options that you have as far as compression on board, dedicated to video, the control you have for audio. So for me, dedicated video or cinema cameras are kind of what I like to choose, just for the ease of use. So, but with that said, I do want to showcase, these hybrid cameras can really pack a punch. There's some really beautiful images that you can get with them, and you can still use, the EF mount is kind of this versatile mount that like a lot of cinema cameras actually use now. So, including the Blackmagic cameras, like it's a very popular mount. So, you can still use those photo lenses on all the Cine cameras. But what I would like to say is let's take a look at the DSLRs that are actually really packing a punch now, meaning the Canon R5, which we'll mainly be showing today, and some of the 1DX Mark III. So I have a couple here that these have been recorded on an external recorder, and all I'm going to showcase are in 10-bit, but there are things to know. Limitations, things that you need to turn on and turn off inside your menus, and we will dive into some of that. So on my screen here, these right here, I'm using picture styles to get this nice desaturated black and white look, right? The monochrome, if you will. And then this right here came from a raw image, right? So I just have this, basketball on a Lazy Susan inside, a motorized Lazy Susan inside of a little photo studio for products. So this right here this one in particular is from the 1DX Mark III, and you can see all the lovely detail in here. Also the soft fall off, that's mainly from the lens. But as far as the image itself, because it's also this beautiful 10-bit image, you can see kind of just how much information you're seeing in the color here. Like even if this is in low light, you could still capture all this goodness in here without seeing too much crunch, too much pop, and without losing or burning pixels. What I look at for when you blow out a sky, it's considered burnt toast. It's really hard to rescue it. But there is internal recording of RAW, Canon RAW is available to be recorded internally, which is great. You could never do that in the past. I mean, I think in recent years, in the last few models, you can do that. But to do that on a DSLR, just like you would do a photo, is such a really big leap for Canon. So inside
what also helped us out a great deal with that note is the simple fact that using the CF Express cards, the CFast Express cards, allows us to have that data stream to do that raw to the media card. And that's one of the biggest things that when the cameras came out, let it be the 1DX Mark III and the R5, the CF Express cards are not cheap. They're still about $1 per gig, $1.50 per gig. So 512 will be easily $500-600 for a card. But you need that type of media, that type of speed and bandwidth, so you can shoot that raw capability at the 2,600 megabits per second that you're downloading at that thing.
Yeah.
Can
So
you say just quickly something about log versus raw? That's a question that came up on the board.
So on our side, the main difference is going to be the what is processed and what is not. So with log, when you're shooting log and you're shooting a processed video file, obviously, what you're gaining is that extra stops of latitude. So with Canon log, the original one, the one that the R5 and the 1DX Mark III has, it gives you 12 stop of latitude. If you and as well as the 10-bit file, so it gives you that 10-bit video file. If you shoot raw, now you got that 12-bit, off of raw video, so you have more information, more data unprocessed, and you have the benefit of raw. I can change the ISO, the color balance, exposure control that you expect out of any raw format.
Awesome.
But with that said, it's a lot of data and it takes more processing time for your output. It just adds more time to your workflow. So you better time yourself for that.
So, outside of the log and the raw situation is also Canon includes now this PQ mode, which is basically straight out of the camera HDR that you don't necessarily have to grade. You can do very minute touches to it and it looks beautiful. This right here in particular is shot in PQ mode. And it's just really beautiful. All the highlights pop. You have like the full range. And I want to say so the official Canon answer, are we saying 14 plus stops? Is it 15 stops of dynamic range, Genaro?
Yeah, so PQ by its nature, I believe it's just 14 plus stops to hit that HDR realm. But when you shoot in log, all you get is 12 stops. In the cinema cameras, again, these little things that separate the hybrid cameras from the dedicated cinema units. On the C300 Mark IIs, Mark III, etc., I have Canon log 2 and 3. Those 2 extra logs gives me up to 14 and 16 plus stops. But again, I'm still limited to just that 12 stop with the Canon log within the DSLR realm. So PQ gives you that, it now touches that HDR realm, which is 14 plus. And of course, you need an HDR screen and playback to really see the full benefit.
So just to touch on this really quick, the idea is you might not be able to see it, but you can record it, and on an external source like an Atomos, anything that's HDR capability, like I was able to see exactly what I was recording in my Atomos recorder, my Shogun 7, but I couldn't see it in camera. And there's the viewfinder assist, which allows you to see the highlights or exposure, right? Was that what it was?
Yes, exactly. So while you have PQ HDR capability in the camera with the R5, you have to keep in mind that the digital electronic viewfinder and the back LCD is not an HDR monitors, which means they have the same latitude from previous generations. And when you're shooting that PQ, in the menu, you actually have 2 separate options. You can tell it to, while recording, show me the mids to highlights, just to make sure that I'm not blowing out my highlights, or the shadows. You pick one or the other, and then during playback in the camera, maybe play back the shadows or the highlights as well, because it can't show them all at once. It's got to pick a range. Only on an HDR display or an external monitor, as you were saying with Atomos, can you actually see the full range in real time at once.
Nice.
So,
by the way, Tony, which lens was this shot on?
That's what I was going to ask, actually.
Yeah, the 50 prime. So I know I don't have it in here right now, but I did actually slate every single shot with all the data you need, and I will compile those and make those available. But you know, for the interest of time, being that I returned the camera to Genaro last night at like 10 o'clock at night, you know, and him being a family man, I don't want to like come over there at midnight and drop off a camera, being that we got to be up early. So, but I wanted to make sure that I grabbed the best of the best. I think I shot maybe half a terabyte worth of stuff, including RAW, including, you know, even 8-bit footage. And even we will also talk just ever so slightly about compression outside of RAW, the all iframe, right, which is the edit friendly, nice kind of chunky file versus the IPB, which is the GOP structure, which will introduce a little compression and doesn't give you the full value, if that makes sense.
And the IPB is about 3 times the compression compared to all I. It's there really to help you with data.
And to be honest, some people might go that route because you don't want to keep buying, you know, 4 terabyte drives. Maybe you're just kind of working on your, you know, the one drive that you have, and you just need to squeeze these clips out. You know, some people will, you know, approach it with a preset. Some people will have time to dial in, and sometimes you literally grab a shot, throw it in, and it goes up for broadcast. So there's no wrong answer as far as compression. Whatever works for you best, and then also kind of it's your way to sculpt. So if you need it, you can shoot it. If you don't need it, then, you know, just compress it. And if you have an external source, you can always grab the 10-bit there. One thing.
For you, Tony.
What's that?
Somebody's asking, well, 2 things really. One, somebody's asking which particular manufacturer, what type of lens did you shoot these on? And also, I want to mention that these are available for download. So you can actually download. Tony's very kindly made these, uploaded those. So we put a link into the general chat window. But we found that if somebody asks where's the link for the footage in the Q&A, we can add that, and that's probably the easiest way to show you right now. We'll send you the links after the event, but just wanted to let you download them in so you can have a look at some of these clips as we are talking about them.
Yeah.
So all the links, I mean, all the clips that you'll get are from the recorder. They're in 10-bit, they're in ProRes, and they're edit-friendly links, so you don't have to worry about. If you do use H.265, here's one quick thing I'll add. When you record an H.265, on the R5, there's a really interesting mode. I think it's amazing. At the same time, be ready to transcode, because playing back H.265 is really hard. It's actually, Diego and I were talking about this earlier. For grading, it's great, but then you're really just kind of jumping through and grading a few frames and hoping that everything in between matches and the light doesn't change dramatically. So the best thing you can do, like in DaVinci Resolve, you can optimize your media and choose your flavor. If you happen to see yourself doing this all the time, you can go in and kind of always choose to use optimized media when available, or even make proxy media. So it's either you're going to make something that you can master with, like a ProRes or DNX, or you're going to make something lightweight for a proxy that you can actually play back easier. So you have a ton of options. I'll just tell you, with these options, you can actually, you know, the way that you dial in your camera, you can get so many different looks by just changing the menu setting of the compression versus HDR, HDR capable log files versus baked in HDR ready to go. So if you want to impress people and you have 10 seconds to do it, maybe you want to go to the PQ mode, and that's going to be different than if you went to log mode and now somebody has to add a LUT, you have to grade it and all this.
Do you have to buy a camera that is, okay, here's a simple question.
Sure.
Do you just follow the crowd and buy the one that's the most popular, or the one that perhaps is on the list for the Netflix post-production alliance? Is that a good way forward?
First, I want to say thank you, Netflix, for liking my camera. But, you know, second of all, I'd like to say, like, it's a bonus. You know, if you're going for that kind of work, it doesn't hurt that, like, you have the capability. So the producer I'll tell you right now, if you want to get hired, have an SDI port on your camera. Like, with these, when you have an external recorder, now you have that SDI port. A lot of the times, it's really the ports that you have on your camera is what gets people to rent your camera, more than even, like, people still mention the C300. It doesn't matter which version. It's literally a buzzword. People mention the Sony FS7 all the time. It's a buzzword. Like, it needs to shoot at least a 10-bit image.
Yes.
And at this point, I think we are way beyond worrying about having a 10-bit image. Almost everything will. Your iPhone, your Samsung, all of them will have the capability to shoot a 10-bit image. So that, you know, as far as what I would pick or what I would say is, like, at this point, we have 1 million people reviewing cameras. You can actually point out and see who's actually doing some good testing and good work. I'm not going to call any names. There's some great ones out there, though. And then I would definitely take a look at the Netflix, you know, alliance and see what they have to offer.
I put that link up in the chat, actually. So and if somebody wants that link again, message or rather write a question, and I'll type it into the Q&A section as well. And just further on that thought, this might be a question for Genaro, that Michael has asked. Sorry, it was Christopher. Forgive me. But what if you got an older camera? And actually, this was part of Michael's question too. How can you make the best of something that you've already got? For example, he mentions the 1DX Mark III. Sorry, Mark II, not 3, where there's no C-Log on it. Are there any good modes on some of these legacy cameras that you can recommend?
For older DSLR cameras that don't have Canon log and you're trying to get that muted look, right? The best built-in option you can get would be using the neutral picture style, which applies no contrast, no saturation, barely any sharpening, and you just get a little bit more tonality spread within your in your image. It makes it more flatter. So that's a workaround. I remember after the 5D Mark II and Mark III, there were Canon-like logs, logs out there that third-party companies and individuals were creating that you could download for free. I remember one called Cine, I think it was.
Able Cinetech did one.
Able Cine, yes. Yeah, I remember Technicolor even making one back then.
Yes.
Because again, our cameras were so popular in such a short amount of time for that pro high-end video cinematographer. So that was another way you can install that picture style. It wasn't log. Now I'm not going to say it was exactly it. The Canon log itself, you do get that extra push and benefit from the sensors. But that's the best way I can recommend with that.
And let me add one thing to that. Go external. So if you go external, you can actually paint your image. You're just getting the camera's an eyeball at that point. You're bypassing the compression, and you're just
getting that 4:2 output.
Yeah. So if you do the picture style, that works. And then you kind of flatten everything out. You also don't want digital sharpening. You don't want any like added extra detail. As far as if you want a softer, simple image. So externally, you could actually go in and you can choose inside of most recorders, right? Whether it's the Atomos, the Blackmagic, or even and I think the sound devices or video devices. There's a handful of them, and with that, I would say you can actually paint the look of it before you even record, and the camera at that point just becomes an eyeball, if that makes sense.
Nice.
This could jump into a question that Amir asked a little while ago. I think you're beginning to answer it about, he had a good couple of questions about one of the biggest mistakes to avoid in your opinion as a filmmaker, and how do you set up for working with the grading department if you're the DOP?
I like to give them, like, if I want to do anything fancy that might be permanently damaging, like shooting something with baked in color, I want to make sure that I also have, like, with certain recorders, you actually have the benefit of recording internally and then recording externally, right? Most cameras will allow you to do that. So I make sure that I have the backup that they want, right? Maybe I can provide the idea and paint it with a LUT in my camera and say, hey, I like this and this is the way I'm going, but I'll just shoot it and then kind of give them the flat file and let them do their magic. I do not try to step on anybody's toes. You do color, then that's you. Me, I do, I basically make the image, and a lot of the times a LUT or anything like that will be a reference that I just toggle on and off, and I usually just kind of work for exposure and shape and and kind of just want to make sure it looks like the light is hitting in the right places, the texture is in the right spots. Like for me, like even just looking at this right here, I want to make sure that I can see, you know, where the light hits, and I want to make sure the shape is there. I want to make sure it's in focus. So there's a lot more other concerns for me than like dialing in a specific look. I really would have something that like maybe 2 or 3 different LUTs that I can just toggle on and off as a monitoring version, just as a template, but not, I don't really paint the camera too hard.
Got it. It's an interesting topic also to consider what you're making and who you're making it for, because Genaro, would you say that you can get away with just jumping into PQ mode, or is it better to figure out, do you actually need that HDR workflow, depending on whether you're doing something which is going to be broadcast that way?
Well, it also depends on your output, to be quite honest, and also knowing how to shoot for HDR. I come from a cinematography background myself before I got with Canon. So, you know, back in the day when I had a C-stand or some stuff outside of the window of a room in a scene, if I knew that was going to be blown out white, no worries. You know, oh, I can see the whole crew there, but in the camera, you don't. My final audience does not. But if you're not shooting for HDR, and you have to keep in mind with the R5, if I'm shooting HDR, PQ, let's say I forgot to change my recording reference from mediums to highlights, and in my LCD it looks like the one was blown out, but in reality when I bring it back to the coloring system or back to my editing room, oh, guess what? I see the whole truck outside the window. So to capture HDR, you need to know how to first shoot for HDR, know your output, have HDR monitors, which we also manufacture very nice field production HDR monitors. They are not cheap, but they're incredibly high quality. So you have to add that whole workflow. It's not just a matter of like, I'm going to shoot HDR to have it. It's, I got to know how to color and expose for that.
So if you hadn't, what do you do if you hadn't got like an HDR panel? Are there mechanisms to kind of look out for actually on the screen itself?
Well, in ours, yes. So like I was saying, in the menu on the R5, you can actually tell it to display to you the lows to mids or mids to highs when you're in the PQ method of video. For other monitors, I can't really say, but again, as you can see, you got the external monitors that have HDR capability now that are not that expensive, so that can help you in your workflow. If you have an HDR LCD at home, a consumer LCD, a lot of them are now more affordable and are, you know, either Dolby, PQ Vision compatible. Basically, you have that HDR capture capability or display back. Then you can add that to your workflow so that you can see what you captured. But on the day of recording, if you don't have that with you, the camera just has that option, one spectrum over another.
Got it. There's that old saying, isn't there? What's the best camera for your particular shoot or the particular occasion? And it's partly the one that you happen to have with you. And this might,
you know what, the one I like to say, because I get that question a lot in a lot of my workshops that I do also, is a best quote I heard a long time ago was that the amateur worries about their gear, the professional worries about their subject. You know, and even though I'm a Canon, you know, pro rep, obviously, I've shot with everything under the sun over the years. All cameras are awesome. I'm not going to diss one over another. Really what you want to look at is, where does a camera stand out in this uniqueness? Maybe this brand has better low light capability. Maybe this one has better slow motion. Maybe this one has better warmer tones in their sensor or their lenses. We do this with lenses, with Zeiss and Cooks and Canon lenses and third-party lenses, Sigma, Tamron. They all have their unique quality. So whenever you say, what's the best camera, really the better question is, what does my story need? Is this a horror, a love, a romance, a documentary? Am I going to shoot in high ISO, low light? Or am I going to have 10K HMIs everywhere so I have more than enough light that I need? That's really where you should start the conversation.
Or
I like that. Yeah.
Or do you need to buy like 50 accessories to make your camera work?
Yeah, exactly. You know, the question always is should I buy a DSLR or a cinema-centric camera? And I always reply back with, is 60 or 70% of what you make money right now, your work, is it video? If you come to me saying 60% or less is video, then maybe a hybrid system, because you're still doing a lot of stills, you're still a photographer, will be a better, more capital efficient way of working. But if you're like, I'm 60+% video, so you're more cinema centric, and there is major benefits on the cinema over the video and the DSLR. At that point, really, you need a dedicated video camera. and not get $3,000 worth of accessories to make your DSLR into what should have been just a C300.
Well, actually, I think you did the reverse of what I was talking about. I was talking about if you buy a $10,000 plus camera, that you still need to buy stuff just to get it to turn on, right? So I'm not actually talking about.
No. If you go with the C700, yes, that's our 20,000 plus camera.
Yeah, there's a lot of cameras that, oh, here you go, here's a camera. Okay, you want batteries? Here, you have to have this to put the battery onto that. So there's that too. So that's
a whole different realm. Yeah. That's high-end production 700, where all you're getting is the camera itself, and you gotta still buy the power for it.
You still need to buy the cards that cost a lot of money too. So,
well, what I would another quick question, Tony, from the floor, and then I'm going to ask you quickly to run through the different settings that you got of those clips that you got on screen here, because I just wanted to jump over to Diego and just show how you can then pair those settings and then set things for grading as well. just before we get there, sure. Christopher, sorry, John had an interesting question about using a C70. And do you have any advice to separate the background from an interview? And he often finds himself masking people during the grading to darken the background and lighting the subject. So got any particular tips on that? Plus, could you give us a little overview or a technical background of your clips?
I would say, first of all, like I still don't even have the C70 yet. I'll have it next week, hopefully, right? Fingers crossed, Genaro.
Yeah, the C70 and the C300 Mark III, they're very high demand. So we're hoping for you to get in the next few days.
So my answer to that is like I haven't put my hands on that camera yet. I'm supposed to this week. I'll take note of that question, and I'll see if maybe I can shoot a test with that and dial in some settings and see where we get as far as lighting and as far as, also available time. So, but to be honest, I haven't had it in my hands yet.
Got it. Quick follow-up as well from Fairley, who does a lot of doc work, and they say, I use the 500 Mark II a lot, but for a low-profile mate for it, would you go with the R5 or the 1DX Mark III?
You know what's funny about that? So, all right, let me tell you two things about my experience on that, and then Genaro, I'm sure, can chime in with that. With the R5, you have up to 8K. Yes, it can overheat. It has overheat protection. If you're getting glimpses and you're doing it for like beauty shots, if you were doing an 8K interview, no way. That doesn't really, you would do, there's this really interesting mode that's shot in H.265, 10-bit. It basically will take the full 8K image and it debayers into a 4K really rich image, and it's called 4K HQ mode. So basically we'll just go 50%, but give you a really rich 4K image, and that looks amazing. And that's all H.265, and you can kind of squeeze that into your card, and looks, for what it is pretty phenomenal. But as far as capability wise, the 1D X Mark III will actually do the same thing, but it shoots a 5K RAW, so it only downsizes 5K RAW to that 4K plus. So as far as capability, if you want like the 8K and then the 4K, basically the richer image, go the R5. If you have a ton of EF mount lenses, right, the R5 is an RF mount. The 1DX, sorry, I'm saying all these numbers here. 1DX Mark III is an EF. So you would still need to pick up the converter in order to be able to use your EF mount, unless you want to invest in RF lenses. So that might play into your decision. Also, the functionality wise, there wasn't that much of a difference to me. Once you jump into the menu system, the menus are very similar. There's some really interesting developments on, if you want weatherproof, go with the 1DX. If you want, kind of the latest, greatest, as far as like being able to shoot a higher capability file, like an 8K, then I would go the R5, but just understand the cost is going to be the lenses or the adapter.
Got it. Can we just jump into your clips then before we hand over to
yes,
Diego?
no problem.
Because we've got to do a balance. And
Yes, we do.
thank you for bearing with us. It's such an enormous subject. We want to try and hit a number of different points as we go along.
So I'm just gonna, this one right here, I'm gonna kind of go with this. I know a handful of these, exactly what they are. And then I want to say I did some stuff, I think Genaro mentioned earlier, that you can shoot the PQ mode, but with log instead, like you do a desaturated PQ mode, I want to say. I really did some interesting combinations, and I have all the slates, but let me show you the ones that I do know exactly what they are. This is PQ in its finest. This one right here is kind of, you're seeing all those glowing highlights. You can see all the metallic paint on the ball. You can see the highlights in the background. This has a really soft fall off. That's just because I was shooting it WFO, wide open, right? And this one right here, I want to say is the PQ mode with the neutral setting, not the neutral setting, but the in log mode. Correct me if I'm wrong, Genaro, if that makes sense.
Yes. So if you're going for log, then you gain the full bit information with the PQ.
Yeah. So you can still see, if you look at this one, you can still see all those highlights, and you can still see that it kind of does a lot of the HDR work for you, but you at least are not all the way at the top of the ceiling, and you're gonna bump your head when you just drag ever so subtly. With this clip, it's already super saturated. It's already ready to go. You literally can maybe remap your colors, but not push it too hard before it starts to look like candy, So, but this one right here, same thing, PQ, just kind of allowing for a little bit more of a grade and a little bit more handle. So this is PQ with the log settings. And then this one right here is picture styles. So the thing about picture styles that I will mention, right? Picture styles, you think of photo. It's a way of painting your camera. If anybody worked in traditional broadcast, where you actually paint your camera and you have to go in and kind of dial in how much red, how much green, where is the pedestal, where is the gamma? That's where you're actually painting. And here, picture styles, and we'll cover it maybe next week a little bit more in depth, because there's a picture styles editor. You can get very technical with it, but you can also, I would say, you can bake in some really interesting artifacting into your image by adjusting the sharpening and adjusting the detail and stuff like that. So it has color information in that picture style, but it also has sharpness, digital sharpness. Use the sharpness of the lens. I would actually dull out all the sharpness, even maybe go one hair minus, and same with detail. But with this, I want to say that this was portrait mode, right? And then I also chose highlight tone priority. So the camera kind of, how do you describe that best? And then like highlight tone priority is kind of giving, it's allowing for the light to poke through without blowing out, or kind of regulating it. Or...
So it's processing the data very differently, and we're very careful on how we label it all as well, because theoretically it sounds like we just gave you an extra 2 stops of latitude in your shot, and you'll see that you'll see that extra detailed information, but not really. That's the case. What's going on when you enable something called highlight tone priority in the DSLRs, which PQ takes a benefit of also, is that 12 stops of latitude that you had, we moved it over to the highlights by 2 stops. So what was blown out, let's say the clouds, the edge of the sky, it's now within exposure. Now you have that detail. You didn't lose all that capture. So then the question is, what happens to the 2 stops of shadows then, right? We just shifted it over. Well, those 2 darkest spots of latitude in your image, and if this all happens in real time, it's actually being processed at almost double the ISO from the rest. So basically what happens is that if you're shooting, let's say 200 ISO, your whole shot is being exposed at 200, but these 2 shadowy areas, these very dark areas in the shot, are processed as if they were being shot at 400, which means it can get just a little bit more noisy. Now at 200, 400, 600, 800, that's not a big deal. But if you're shooting like 3200, now you're really doubling up those shadows. So it's one thing to be aware of. That's really what we're doing for highlight tone priority. It was designed, keep this in mind, for the wedding videographer and photographer. Actually, they're being paid good amount of money for a weekend wedding reception and show and everything else. And the dress the bride is wearing cost way too much money probably. And your job is to make sure that you capture every detail on that dress outside on a sunny day in the park. And that's really what it was there for, is for them to guarantee that they get that detail for the final photo and video.
Good.
Excellent. I'm going to make you a presenter now, Diego.
All right.
So we'll just show some of these. Here we go. Because I know you had a couple of interesting comments about working with the footage and then setting things up and relating back to what people have shot.
All right. So the first thing that I want to say is that if you're a colorist, you need to know about cameras. That's the first thing. That's the first thing. And usually when someone says to you, hey, we are going to record with a photo camera, that is probably hybrid, is the official name and it's better. But they say to you, we're going to record with a photo camera. You say, the first thing you say, like, okay, probably I just can balance, I just can make so much, but I cannot make like beautiful things. So hybrid, I like the name. Hybrid cameras is nice. The other thing that you probably imagine when someone says to you, photo cameras is 8 bits and low dynamic range. That's the first thing you imagine, and Rec 709. Or if not Rec 709, Cine style. That in some way I didn't like it so much. I had some frustration with the Cine style. Why? Because many of that footage were 8 bits. So what I'm thinking, Genaro, correct me if I'm wrong, if I have like a gray image and I have 8 bits, when I'm pulling it out, I don't have color. So what I found is noise.
Yes, because in the end, all they were doing was just trying to pull and keep as much data from what that sensor could capture, but it's still in the end being processed back down to an 8-bit output file, unless you go external, where you can get some more information. Until now you can go 10-bit or higher.
Yes. So that was like my first, my first thoughts when you say to me, okay, hybrid cameras. Then I start to read about the cameras. And then with Tony, I start to get my first footage. So I will show it to you. And here, okay, first my first my first thought was, okay, how I need to work with this footage. If it's 10 bits, if it's 12 f-stop of dynamic range, I'm not going to work based on a display. That is how you usually work here. This is based on display. I'm going to work based on the scene, and I want to work with the highest working color space that in some way Resolve have it, that is DaVinci Wide Gamut. I could work also with ACCT, but with this kind of camera that is a really nice camera, I say I'm going to work based on the scene. So that was my first thought. Then I say, okay, I have a high dynamic range camera, so why not to try the high dynamic range new module of DaVinci Resolve? So all I did was here, and it was, if you see my, let me show you. If you see here my node, like my node tree, I have one exposure node when I'm like finding the correct exposure here, and then I have a node for highlights, and I have a node for shadows. So the first thing, correct me, Tony, this is R5, right?
Yeah, that's an R5, yes.
Yes, so the first thing I noticed is, wow, the dynamic range is really, really awesome. And usually I have a frustration with the MP4 file, because every time you take or you start like to touch the MP4 file, the footage breaks. The footage breaks and you start to find like artifacts. With this kind of footage, it was really nice. I don't have any artifacts, and let me show you here. And I have high dynamic range. That is what I was searching for. Look at this one. And this was like my node structure. Also, with the H.264 files, when you usually make qualifiers, you have a lot of macro blocking, So I wanted like just to test like to make a Luma key and start to making something like this, and I don't see actually any macro blocking. That is really interesting, really interesting for this kind of files. Look, I don't have any macro blocking, and I was like, wow, this is a great file for grading. But I have one problem when I start to hit play. Let me just try to hit play, and I couldn't hit play. So that was like my main problem. I have it. Look, I don't have play. I have like 17, and I have external eGPU. So my workflow in this case was like, okay, I don't have a normal H.264 file because colorists, we hate H.264. When we have H.264, we say what? But so what I did was, okay, if I don't have playback, let's make good quality proxies. I made a ProRes 444 proxies. You can make it 422, and I made 444, and I have all the information, and I have playback. So here I have playback. Let me just look, 23, and I have playback. So that was like my main workflow, and because I have good material, I have good footage, I say I don't want to work with leaf gamma gain offset as we used to work before. I want to work with the HDR panel, and for example, I have this beautiful starting point that is really good. I have this beautiful starting point because I'm working with DaVinci White Gamut that already like delog that footage, and I just make really simple things. Look at it here.
We've got a quick question from Axel, just on this subject about the fact that he brings up a good point about we have to, a lot of the time, work with 8-bit. So I know you've been pointing out a few of the ways that you work with the 8-bit files, but any specific hints for getting the best out of 8-bit if you have to work with it?
Yeah, if it's 8 bits, forget this panel, high dynamic range. That will be my first tip. All right. And then, I mean, don't work in aces. Probably aces will also break your footage. I don't know if DaVinci White Gamut, but if it's 8 bits, I will work as we used to work before. DaVinci White Gamut and with Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. I will say that, and try not to force your footage. Go matching, go balancing, but try not to force. It's better to have a good looking footage than a breaked footage in the blacks or in the whites. All right, so based on that, what I did in this, for example, this is like a sunset. What I found is that if I go zoom here, and if I try to raise it a little bit, I'm starting to find noise. And this noise, and here I find the compression. This noise is that kind of noise that it will be really difficult like to clean it, because it's like pixel noise. It's not just noise, it's pixel noise and with full of colors. But I mean, it's normal because this was shot in the night. At what time was shot this, like, Tony?
Like this is maybe like 20 minutes after sundown. The sun just went down.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it's
probably.
really high ISO too.
All right, so this is something really interesting also. Here, for example, this one, and I raise it, but when I raise it, I try to keep like the blacks in the place, just not to raise so much and to get a lot of noise, that thing. So that was about the, let me see. Yes, so that was about the H.265. All or in some way, my first thoughts is a great file for working, for grading, not so much for playing, for playback, but you can have proxies. But it's actually changed my mind, because it usually, I don't know, it's like when you're thinking when compression or H.265, you say, okay, they are great for playback, not in a grading or in an editing software, but they are great for playback. But for grading, they are really limited because they are so compressed. With this H.265, I found it great for grading. I definitely could make some things like this one, for example, when I have like, let me show here. I actually love this one when I have all the detail from here and a lot of detail from here. But definitely for playback, I need to process it in a ProRes file. Okay, so that was about the H.265. Now with the RAW. So with the RAW also, my recommendation is if you have RAW and if you have like more than 12 f-stops, always work in scene referred. I mean, it's like right now we have to get used to DaVinci Wide Gamut or ACES always work because you want to take all the advantage of the high dynamic range. And I did also the same. For example, in this case, I have like this was, let me show you. This is like the log. This is like the log footage. Then I apply the DaVinci Wide Gamut like conversion, saying that this is, remember that if it's raw, you don't need to make absolutely anything. Like in the input device transform or in the input color space. In the H.265, what I did was I select this one, Canon Cinema Gamut Canon Log 3 as an input device transform, just for you to know what was the process of the input. And here it was the same process. In the first node, I was like playing with the exposure a little bit, playing with exposure to find like a good starting point. Then I start playing with the highlights and then with the shadows. And I found that it's great that you have like 6 color or tonal zones in the HDR panel because you can have like, for example, let me show it to you here in the shadows. Usually you don't have like all of this detail, or when you are like using lead gamma gain, when you are playing with the highlight and the specular, these ones over here, you can force your image in this part to start like having this kind of details at the top. And as you notice in this case, I don't know what was the time here, probably 5 or 6 p.m.
Yeah, it's about 6 p.m.
Yeah, so I have a lot of details here, a lot of details, and I don't have anything clipped. If I don't have anything clipped in my waveform, it means that I can play a lot with highlight and specular here in my HDR panel. Okay, and finally, I tried like to play a little bit with this shot. That this shot was completely like, if this is log and has noise, you don't have so much to do. So that's sometimes like what we are thinking. If it's log and you see a lot of noise, probably if you start like stretching your footage, you're not going to find a good results. But I say, why not? Let's play it. So the first thing was I play with exposure, as I told you before with this. Then I play with the shadow, like to crush a little bit this part, and then I play with the highlight to have this beautiful detail. And this is what I'm loving of this footage, of this high dynamic range footage, and the high dynamic range palette, because I can like achieve these beautiful details in the highest part of the image. And finally, because I mean it was noisy from the start, so I did a little bit of noise reduction. I don't know if you can notice over there, and it did a really good result. And I can say that I have a good image, and probably I rescue that image. There is still noise, but it's not so bad. And what I found also with this noise is that in the H.265, I have a noise that was like a pixel noise, really difficult like to clean. In this case, I have like point noise, as you notice in this part. I really like pointing noise, and it was for me easier to clean it with the internal noise reduction of Resolve. So that was like my impressions. In some way, I can say that if someone says to me, hey, we're going to record with the 1DX and we don't have the cards and we don't have a storage, I will say, don't worry, it's great. The H.265 is a great file for grading. And finally, I will say with the ProRes, with this one, for example, this one that was Tony showing you, that is like already like a nice image. So what I did was I didn't force it so much because it has already like the highlights and the blacks, but I found that the temperature was a little bit green. So I correct a little bit the temperature using the temperature and tint of the HDR dynamic range that is still, I mean, it's really nice. And then I move a little bit the exposure, like to find it. And that's all. But this image was already done. I just correct a little bit and that's it. And what I found that I still need to play a little bit more with this kind of, this is like the log footage, right, Tony?
Yes, this is all the ones 4 and 5, shots 4 and 5 are the ones with picture styles. This
Yes.
one right here is log.
Yeah, so the first thing was, okay, I select the input color space, this one, the Canon, and then I start like to make something similar as the one, but in this case, I have to play a little bit more. I found a little or too much of green in the ball. Then with this already baked in picture, so probably I have to play a little bit more. But that ones were my conclusions. If you are working in aces, let me just move really fast to aces. If you are working in aces and it crashed, oh no, okay, it's not crash. Okay, that's good. If you're working in aces, so what I did was I didn't select any IDT because most of the material is raw, so I didn't select any IDT. And this is a question in my case for Genaro. I have many IDTs in aces here. Look, and Canon, I think Canon has a full page of IDTs. So what I did was to use an IDT of Canon 1D because
Can you explain IDT, what IDT means to everybody?
Yes, IDT is the input device transform that the footage needs to have in order to enter correctly into aces. With RAW, you don't need an IDT. With compressed files, you need an IDT. So my main concern was, well, I have many. So I say, hey, if I'm using a 1DX, so let's use 1D. But I don't know if in this case, Genaro, there is a recommendation of you or.
No, so on for the R5, I can't recommend exactly which one might be a better one. We haven't done that internal test yet on our end. As you can see, we have them for the C70, the cinema cameras, and to kind of answer that question a little bit earlier, somebody was asking, I got a C500, should I look at the R5 or a 1D? You actually might want to look at the C70 also. That's that more compact, non-intrusive, like that won't stand out in the crowd too much type of a cinema camera. And as you can see from with the ITT profiles and everything that we've done in-house, we have something for the C70. But for the R5, just keep in mind, yeah, using the 1D might be a way to go. Using any of the Canon Log 1 might be another one to test out with your workflow. I haven't had any time to test out that myself with ever since the lockdown. So I can't really recommend which one might be a better starting point for the R5, other than the fact that you only have that Canon Log in the R5.
Good. That's
got a quick question for you, Diego. By the way, thanks for all the questions like the workflows for ACES and some of the other workflows about how do we do the noise or the noise reduction. What we're hinting at this week is some of the post-production techniques we'll delve in more to over time. We just wanted to start off and get the most out of some of the technical workflows that you can work with the camera, especially whilst we have Genaro on the line, so we can just make sure that we're saying the right things. We want to finish up also, after asking you this question, Diego, to hand over to Max just to show you a handful of things that you can do in Premiere Pro as well, because a lot of these techniques aren't limited to Resolve, and I know everyone is using a different piece of software for grading and production and editing, so I just wanted to give you a flavor of some of those too. But John just had an interesting one I wanted to ask you, Diego. Do you have any advice on desaturating the shadows for a more cinematic look? And do pro colorists actually use this trick?
Yeah, I mean, in many notaries, at the end you can find a note that says black shadows in some way or clean blacks. And yes, I use it. in the way that I always think that when your shadows are really like going to another color, magenta or blue or green, it will look like Instagram. It will look like, I don't know, like one filter. So in my case, I guess probably in my node reads, at the end I have something that is called clean blacks. And I usually clean blacks with the loom versus sat, or you can make a loom here, desaturating the blacks. But yes, definitely, don't contaminate the blacks. That's what I can say.
I suppose the answer to that question is also it depends if you're making a high-end music video where you're going to do exactly the opposite.
Yes, it depends, but it's something that you have to take care.
But that's a nice tip in general. Just try and keep them desaturated. Okay, lovely. And thank you, by the way, for everyone for bearing with us. We'll just run over a few minutes because I just wanted to hand over to Max to help with those with showing us some Premiere Pro stuff. So whilst I do that, Max, let's just hand over to you and make you a presenter. We had a couple of questions for you, Diego, and also for you, Genaro, about providing some links to resources for good ways of finding out more about these camera interactions and specific links to the cameras. So I'll ask you for those to send me those, and we'll add those into the links for the recording on the YouTube descriptions.
I'll add it to the chat real quick. On RSN, basically the links I'll be giving will be taking you to our video pages. Also, one thing I highly recommend is signing up to our Canon YouTube USA page, because we do video releases on firmware updates, specs, release, and stuff like that. And it'll be the first places that we post them up. So I'll send up that information on the chat. I'll copy it and paste.
It's not a bad idea to check out Able Cine Tech. They do the workbench videos on most cameras that come out today as well.
That's a good point, actually.
Good.
Right.
So,
can anyone
Max?
see my screen? Can everyone see my screen? All right. So let me quickly cover the Premiere Pro workflow. What if you are an editor and you don't want to do the round trip workflow to Resolve, for example, and you just want to do it inside your NLE. So in this case, I will try to showcase the Magic Bullet Suite workflow. So for example, if you have Magic Bullet Suite from Red Giant, this is like really, you're gonna be in for some treat here. Here I will just showcase the raw footage from Tony, shot in 1DX Mark III. So I'm not quite sure in which Premiere Pro that Premiere Pro finally managed to be able to process CRM file, but it's in a quite new update. I think it's like a year old or something like that. So once you load your RAW file inside Premiere Pro, you can see all the, how do you call it, all the raw settings in the effects controls. And if you highlight the master controls, then you have the color, temperature, tint, and exposure, and also the color space and gamma. And here you can choose whatever setting you like to use. Here I will use the Cinema Gamut and Canon Log 2, since I think Canon Log 2 has more dynamic range to work with compared to Log 3, right, Genaro?
Yeah, so here's a quick rundown between all three versions. Canon Log 1 gives you 12 stops. Canon Log 2 gives you 16 plus stops, hence HDR realm. And then Canon Log 3 is the 14 stops. You go down a few stops on Canon Log 3 actually. And the reason for that is because when we released Canon Log 2 at the beginning of that release years ago, people that weren't colorists or really on the high end or weren't that experienced were talking about, wow, I see a little bit more noise in my shadows, because it's pushing up, it's capturing more detail in the low end, so you can get that HDR and the highlights and everything else. That's why you color it and do everything you need to do to make it pretty again. So Canon Log 3 was invented as the in-betweener. Canon Log 3 is in between 1 and 2 for those that are kind of like, I want to have a less of a noise in the shadows, just kind of eliminate that. That's okay if I lose the detail. I want to start from that platform. That's the difference.
I see. Thank you for the explanations. That's very nice. So yeah, the workflow, if you are using Magic Bullet Suite here, I don't think that there will be a lot of change if you are already using Magic Bullet Suite before. But here is the showcase. When you want to color correct your raw footage first, you can also do that in the master footage, like what I did. It was shot in 5,600 Kelvin color temperature. I just make it a little bit warmer and shift it to 6,500. And then after that, to color balance, to color match, balancing your footage, I normally use Colorista. And just by using Colorista, you can use this features that call the guided color corrections if you're not familiar with the color correcting. So by using guided color corrections, you will be introduced into the correct steps when doing color corrections, such as, you know, you tackle the luminance first, and then after that you dwell with the color later, the chroma aspect later. But I will not go into that. I will just walk you through to what I've done. So in this case, I applied a Colorista in the footage, in the raw footage over here. So I just bring up some shadow, and I dropped some shadow down, brought some highlights up, and then bring the midtone up a little bit. So and I also want to point out the new features inside Colorista 4, which is the saturations EQ. I think one of you have asked before, how do you clean blacks in Resolve? You can also do that in Premiere Pro by using Colorista 5, right, Simon? Yeah, 5. By using the saturation CQ, just by dragging the button over here right down to the bottom, means that you are desaturating the lower luminance on your image. So this is what I've done. And on as Diego pointed out, when we are, how do you call it, lifting some gamma and lifting some some shadows, and you can start to see noise artifacts. What I've done here in Premiere Pro, I just dropped in the denoiser, and here in denoiser, it's a really simple 5 sliders plugins to remove noise. And if I just reset, the default settings is normally will be able to handle most noise, but here I just like pump up the reduce noise, and to reduce the macro blocking, the color noise, I use the smooth colors and pump it up a little bit. And as you can see, before the denoiser and then after the denoiser, and on top of that, I also use an adjustment layer on top of that, on top of the clips itself. So for example, if you have many clips on your timeline, using adjustment layers, you will be able to create looks in a very fast manner to cover different clips. Here in this adjustment layer, I have Magic Bullet Looks installed. Applied. So here I would like to point you to the new features inside Magic Bullet Looks, which is called the color handling. Before this new release, Magic Bullet Looks normally just output into an sRGB color space, but here using the color handling, which are the some gamma curves behind it, you can define your footage, and then you can also set the output as same as input, and you will get, by using this, I can now use Magic Bullet Looks inside color management workflow inside Resolve, for example. So for example, here I just drop some diffusions filters, and I have some color blend, and I have the unity to unify all the hues, and I soften the shadow using the Telecine tools. But I will not go into log because it's already previously processed by Colorista. My image was already balanced by Colorista, so I will just use sRGB here. And if I confirm that, I will got this look. But since this is a raw image, if you want to push the looks? You can, because it's a very wide, high dynamic range image. For example, what I did here, I use Magic Bullet looks to establish the looks on the clip level. Sorry, this was the adjustment layer, sorry. So what I've done here, I drop in some diffusion filter and then also a color blend filter and some tools inside Magic Bullet looks. But the most important thing to notice here that I put my input gamma curves as C-log, and then the output is also into a C-log. So it is not compressing all the color into a Rec 709 space. And when I confirm that, I got this type of look, and pretty much the coloring aspect of the clip is already handled, and I just drop in Colorista to tackle the contrast of the clip. But since now it looks overkill, I will reduce the strength of Magic Bullet looks into around 60%. And to finish the look, I will drop in my renoiser. What renoiser do is actually it's actually reintroducing the texture into your footage. It's giving you those cinematic grain if you would like to. And since it's in the end of the chain, I also use renoiser as a sharpening tool. And here, as you can see, I sharpen it quite a lot because it's in the end of the chain. This is the best, how do you call it? Opportunity to sharpen it a little bit. So yeah, that is what I've done with a raw clip in the Premiere Pro. So this is just a teaser of how you can do stuff in the post-productions inside the Premiere Pro and Resolve. If you would like to see more, make sure if you are tuning in to week 4, because we will dive deeper into the post-productions aspects of these clips.
Absolutely, and that's really one of the things that we wanted to do, because there's lots of different levels of experience of various people who are attending us today, and we wanted to kind of concertina in a whole kind of focus on the camera, on one particular style of camera workflow this week, but give you hints at what you also might practically do. And we want to continue to evolve this over the next number of weeks. So that's really useful, Max. And that's nice to see that also you can remove the bad noise, the macro blocking noise with denoising, not only just in Premiere, but also in Final Cut. We had a couple of questions about what do you do if you're not using Resolve or Premiere Pro. So all the things that Max has just shown, you can use in Final Cut and Motion as well.
We will break that down into more details in the week 4 when we have more time. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yes,
that's always the key. So thank you everyone for all the questions and diving in. We tried to answer some of them on the text, and we tried to make sure that we asked lots of them live. Please feel free to keep asking us, training@maxon.net. And we'll include as many as we can into the sessions. I know it's a conceit to try and fit in all these production workflows just in 4 sessions, but the whole point of this is to get slightly derailed and answer questions as we go along. So I'm sure you understand, but thank you for bearing with us. And also every other Thursday, every second and fourth Thursday of the month is the Ask the Trainer session. So we can carry on this conversation, not only on these questions, but all the questions about the different aspects of the workflows that we cover across pre-production here and post-production. But I just wanted to leave you with the fact that we're running next week. We're picking up from where we've left off, and we're covering some more camera workflows as well, and more kind of post-production workflows. And so thank you to all our hosts, especially to Diego and to Max and to Tony. And a really extra thanks to you, Genaro, for turning up and throwing all your knowledge at us. We've had a lot of great comments about how useful it's been. So we really appreciate that. And those Well, thank you. Those are some great links that you've given us as well. We'll make sure that all the links that we've mentioned we'll put into the descriptions on that YouTube recording. And just as a final thing, if you weren't aware, we got our YouTube recording is on our Maxon Training Team. Just go to YouTube, search for that, and then you'll find us. And these are all the recordings from this series and all the series we ran last year as well. They're just like openly available. So what can I put you on the spot, Genaro, just to throw in any particular teasers you want to give us for next week that we might be looking at?
Well, that'll be on Tony when he can shoot also. So the plan is is basically to do what we did talk about today and show the extra expand and possibilities of the footage from the C70, our brand new pocket cinema camera with the RF mount, and the C300 Mark III. So basically talking a little bit about that benefit that you can gain from having the Canon Log 2 and Log 3 when you shoot with the camera compared to only having Log original on the hybrid DSLRs.
Fantastic, great stuff. It's a lot to balance, as we've had from our questions through. It's some kit, some theory, some post-production, a lot of creative aspects, and to echo your thoughts about the earlier, and I loved your answer about the fact that it's the story that mounts, that counts more than anything else. So that all these things we're pushing towards a story, and if you don't have a certain type of camera or certain type of kit or workflow, then you make adjustments. But that's why we're doing it. We're doing it for the creative result and how you can communicate your vision to the end users. So that's the key. So we all agreed on something. There we go.
That's good.
Great. Oh, thank you, everyone. Thanks for letting us overrun. You know we were going to. We'll see you next week. And if you want to join us for Lionel's cinema and Redshift sessions, don't forget to sign up on the events page on the Maxon site too. There this week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. But thanks again, everyone. Stay healthy, everyone. And we'll see you on the next one.
Bye-bye. Gracias. Ciao.
Cheers then.